What's today, 20th?
May.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Randy Bach. I'm with the Newton Taxpayers Association of Newton, Massachusetts. And today's a beautiful day, May 20, 2024. And I'm honored to have as a guest with me one Dr. Bharanidharan Padmanabhan. And he's a fascinating guy. And we're not going to be talking medicine, strictly speaking, but we're going to be talking about some things medical. In a sense, the stewardship of the public trust insofar as whether it was held well when the Caritas Christi turned into Steward Health, and now the recent bankruptcy and the fallout thereof. So I'm honored to have with me Bharanidharan Padmanabhan, and that's as good as I'm going to get with this. We'll have to check out his name. I'm going to probably show a QR code to link to his Patreon, because he is one of the genuine journalists out there, and he is a muckraker. Muckraking is a term of art, I don't know, maybe 130 years old, and muck is mud, and you're raking mud. And in order to do that, you have to go through a certain amount of mud to get the facts. And maybe it's referring to like having to rake through muck to get the gold nuggets and so forth. But Bharani is good at that, and he is a dogged reporter. And he writes for the Valley Patriot. And without further ado, Bharani, tell us what you have been working on, what you have uncovered.
Good evening. So I've been looking at the Attorney General's office for about 13, 14 years now as to whether they actually work in the interest of the people of this Commonwealth. We assume lots of things in life, and we assume that the Attorney General is going to be our premier law enforcement officer, and she or he is out to protect the public interest, but that's an assumption. So as a scientist, I thought I should put that to the test. We're all trained to not just assume things. And so I put that to the test. I went looking for evidence, data, to support this assertion, and I found the data is not there, at least in terms of Steward Healthcare.
Right. So you have an article on the Valley Patriot dated April 16, 2024, and there's no sense showing it here, but people can find it based on the title, Martha Coakley's Toxic Legacy is Harming All Our Children. So that's kind of a bold statement. We might all remember Martha Coakley as, in a sense, Maura Healey as Martha Coakley 2.0. Perhaps you can talk about the connections thereof. I guess both attorney generals, both went for governorship, both associated with kind of the white shoe law firms. One, I think Maura Healey's with Wilmer Hale, and Martha Coakley with Nixon Peabody. What's toxic about Martha Coakley, and how can you make a claim to one of our outstanding
public
servants of having a toxic legacy and or harming all our children?
So there are two things that I touched on in that column. The first was about gambling addiction in children. So when Martha Coakley was the Attorney General, she strongly supported legalizing gambling in all its forms. She actually declared as Attorney General that DraftKings and other apps, other formats, platforms, if you will, was not real gambling because it was a game of skill and not a game of chance. And that's how we legalized gambling in Massachusetts, because the Attorney General herself said that. And so now we have a rampant, raging epidemic of gambling in young children, 14-year-olds, college kids. College kids are burning their college tuition money away on gambling apps. It's completely unregulated. The amount of money involved is immense. It's $94 million a year at least that the state collects from sports betting alone. And so much so that, Encore Casino, as I wrote, they pay a $40,000 fine happily every year.
Is that all?
That's it, $40,000 fine. And the state is very happy because it collects $94 million. And
So what's the $40,000 fine specifically for?
For gambling on local sports games and matches, like BU versus BC.
So they have a sports board. I actually don't. I have so many vices I can't keep up with them. But one of them happens not to be gambling.
Correct.
I only do gambling. If I ever do gambling, I do it in a closed circuit. Like if there's a poker table and all the money that comes in the house leaves to its actual members. I don't go any place where a piece of the action supporting the
state,
the venue, the state, and so forth. So I don't do any public gambling, no lottery tickets, nothing like that.
Right.
So I do a closed pool gambling if it happens to be a poker game, but I haven't done that even for a few years.
Right. I don't do poker. I don't do any cards. My mind just I can't count cards or do anything that requires anything mental. So I just stay away from all of that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it's like this huge hose, this fire hose of money coming in, and compared to that, the health of the children doesn't stand a chance. I wrote a pretty harsh paragraph about our Commissioner of Public Health, because one of the things they promised when the gambling was legalized was that the Department of Public Health would run a longitudinal study, that we would be collecting impartial state data on the impact of gambling on everybody in the state, including our children. And one of the things that the Department of Public Health has done is that they have stopped collecting that data, because the data obviously is going to be disastrous. We have an outfit that is run by the gambling industry itself. They've been raising the alarm about this prodigious amount of gambling addiction in young children. If the gambling industry itself is standing up and saying we have a problem, then I mean the failure of the Department of Public Health is just outrageous. And the Attorney General, who set this in motion, Martha Coakley.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit of the background? And speaking of background, I'm hearing some background noise. I don't know if it's I hope it's not part of the broadcast, but it seems like one of the speakers was left on, so I apologize for some of the technical aspects. But could you give us some of the background story of the Martha Coakley connection and where she is right now and what's going on? DraftKings, I think we all have heard about. It's a prodigious company, huge. I don't know if you want to talk about the intersection
Yes.
of I mean, there's a term of art. I've pretty much paid constant, some focus or attention to during COVID called regulatory capture. And so regulatory capture is a term of art, as it were, wherein the people who do the regulating have some kind of goodie for them after the fact. So we've seen it a lot. I think Tom Frieden was the head of the CDC, and he gets to kind of navigate and work on various medical aspects. And after the fact, he gets like a sinecure job, $500,000 running a foundation, despite his own sexual peccadillos and misdemeanor crimes and so forth, which would ordinarily take you away from any of those type of jobs. And so you get on the lecture circuit. Dr. Fauci probably collects good coin for his lectures after the fact, and a lot of those things are supported by pharmaceutical companies. So it's kind of like one hand feeds the other. The regulators will do some obeisance to the companies at hand, and then the companies later on thank them, seemingly, but there's no connection at all to be had, of course.
Well, the connection is the promise of a future reward after they've left office. So what happened in Martha Coakley's case was really egregious, because when she was running for governor, while she was Attorney General, her advisor was the same advisor that DraftKings hired. And people did point it out. It was published information. It wasn't a secret. And luckily, she lost. So, when she joined private practice after she lost and crashed out of public service, which is what I call it, crashed out of public service, she immediately became the legal counsel for DraftKings. So really, it wasn't a big surprise at all to anybody who was watching and paying attention. So that's regulatory capture right there. That's a very classic case of an in-your-face regulatory capture. And the second one was Steward Healthcare. Everybody, thinks that Steward Healthcare is a foreign corporation. It's not. Steward Healthcare started in Boston. It's a Massachusetts company, that was created with the able assistance of Martha Coakley. as I wrote in my column, no Martha Coakley, no Steward Healthcare. That's how close the connection is. So, you know, the Caritas Christi hospital chain was a non-profit, a charitable organization. So they came under the purview of the Attorney General's charitable division. Those are the people who look at all these non-profit organizations because they're tax-free, they're tax-exempt. And so we have to make sure that they're actually doing something in the public interest to qualify for tax-exempt status. And of course, the result is most of them aren't doing enough, you know, to keep up with their promise, but they keep their tax-exempt status anyway. But in the case of Caritas Christi, we have an official document signed by her and by a lady by the name of Mary Beckwith, who is a very senior attorney with the Attorney General's office right now. Mary Beckwith used to be the legal counsel or the compliance counsel for Boston Children's Hospital. She left Boston Children's in August of 2011, joined the Attorney General's charitable division in August of 2011, and in September 2011 signed under oath this remarkable document that was filed with the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, in which Martha Coakley and Mary Beckwith swear under oath that the sale of Caritas Christi hospitals to this new for-profit corporate private entity called Steward Healthcare was in the public interest. Without that signature, Steward Healthcare would not exist, and you know, all the hospitals would not have been sold to other companies. All the money would not have been looted. Patients would not have died. You know, it was just a real corporate raid that was allowed by Martha Coakley. And it is very disappointing to me that in all of the ink that's being spilled on Steward Healthcare today in 2024, not a single person in office is complaining about this fact that, you know, Steward Healthcare was completely a creation of the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. And they should have seen it coming.
So you use a term there, looted.
Yes.
So that's, you know, I don't think you pull punches. I mean, we've already gone through the toxic word here. It's an interesting formulation. I'd like to go back slightly in time to talk about the creation of Steward and why it needed to be created, but only as prefatory, and that is the fact that there were lawsuits against the Catholic Church, and they needed to sell their assets, including, you know,
All the Brighton mansion.
Yeah, the mansions for the what are the bishop or the cardinal.
Cardinal. Yeah.
And so forth, and as well, they had to sell the campuses of their Saint this and Saint that, Carney Hospital and all this kind of stuff, all the Catholic hospitals, which were charitable institutions. You know, just as a preface, you know, a lot of our hospitals came out of religious organizations. I mean, we have them very obviously, you know, the Deaconess and Beth Israel, less obviously in some other hospitals. You know, we see in the Shriners, Burn Center and so forth. So charitable organizations have a history of kind of giving back, and not giving back, but that is kind of their
tax-exempt status.
Telos, their need to do that. And yet, you know, so they had a tough time in the courts, and they had to cough up money. You know, as a total side note, you know, I mean, nobody likes pederasty, and so forth. But I'm not sure it's unique to the Catholic Church. And again, I don't want to throw stuff out without backing it up, but I have heard, and maybe you can corroborate that, you know, there's a higher rate of such chicane, you know, actions and chicanery and whatnot. I think the highest rate of male pederasty is from male elementary school teachers in the country, but they have a union, and they don't get prosecuted by another arm of the state. I mean, I don't know if you may or may not want to touch that.
It's not that I don't want to touch it. I just haven't looked into it at all because it didn't have anything to do with health care.
Fair enough. So in the wake of this, I mean, I just think it's like, you know, the guns of the state go a certain direction. They don't go other directions.
Yeah.
And I just want to put that out there. It tends to be that things that happen in the schools get washed over because they have the cloak, and we saw a lot of things in COVID and whatnot, and everyone kind of washes it away because they have a union protecting them, and other entities that might not be as politically favored do not. I'm just going to put that out there. That's my own bias, if you will. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory per se. But anyway, so in the wake of that, Caritas Christi had to dissolve because the Catholic Church had to sell its assets, and now we have Steward. So I don't know if you want to...
So this private equity firm in New York called Cerberus Investments fronted the cash. So they purchased the assets of the erstwhile Caritas Christi network. But because they were private and they were going to convert it from a charitable organization to a for-profit private hospital chain, they needed the approval of the Attorney General's charitable division. And that's where I think all the wheels came off for reasons that remain unexplained, that should be inquired into under oath. But the people who took that decision are still in power in Massachusetts today. Mary Beckwith or Beckman is still in the Attorney General's office in a much more senior position. She's also the advisor to the Secretary of Health for Massachusetts, Kate Walsh. And so, there seems to be this total reluctance to inquire into how this whole Steward healthcare mess came about in the first place. So I wrote a column specifically to point that out, that, no Martha Coakley, no Steward. Because everybody claims as if it's a Texas company that came in to our state and did all these bad things, and one man, Ralph De La Torre, was personally and solely, exclusively responsible for everything that followed. I mean, I'm not going to stand up for Ralph at all. I mean, nobody needs two $40 million yachts, but especially when his company is sinking and going into bankruptcy.
That's kind of ironic. He's not sinking.
Yes, his boats are not
his
sinking.
His yacht's not sinking.
But again, it wouldn't have happened without the Attorney General. And so that's my point. That's about all I had to say.
So I'm gonna quote here. In order to misdirect away from the toxic Coakley, Brian McGrory and the Globe have focused on Ralph's yacht, exactly like Congress wagged a finger at Detroit auto executives flying to D.C. in corporate jets, as if Congress was going to protect the public purse. And Maura Healey, who worked under Coakley at the time, jumped in to demand that Steward leave the state so it would be out of sight and out of mind, with no one grilling the toxic, as you say, Coakley under oath about what she got from Ralph for allowing all that looting. Lisa Kaczynski admiringly quoted Healey asserting, "It frankly disgusts me that a particular CEO came and chose to do what it appears he did. The blame, the fault is with Steward and its management. Robber barons and looters exist. It was Ms. Coakley's duty to protect us from one such Ralph De La Torre." Steward began right here. No Coakley, no Steward. Again, I'd like you to maybe speak to the looting aspect, because I mean, if Steward comes in, they're not there as a charity. Their mission is not the same as the Catholic Church, and they're there to make money for their investors and so forth. Is it wrong for them to monetize the properties and so forth? And I guess in a deeper sense, it seems like everything's this is a side question, but it seems like everything's amalgamating under the Mass General Brigham umbrella, and everything's kind of annealing to that. I'm wondering whether there's kind of a subplot there, but you can take that or leave it.
So I will start with the looting aspect. So the private company has every right to create a profit for itself. Private hospitals, a lot of hospitals in the States are private hospitals. We have Tenet Healthcare and others. Kaiser Permanente was also private, even though they call themselves nonprofit. The issue is not that they were looting or taking money from insurance companies or patients. It's that executives within the company were looting the assets of the company itself, causing the company to fail and go into bankruptcy. So that's actually the meaning of looting. The hospital wasn't looting society. The hospital wasn't looting the patients. The executives were looting the hospital itself. And that's why, even though the hospitals themselves were popular, like St. Elizabeth's here in Boston, patients kept coming, doctors kept working, operations kept going on, and yet all that money just vanished. It was siphoned out of the system. The properties themselves were sold. So the building that the hospital was in, which the hospital owned previously, now the hospital doesn't own it anymore. It has to pay a huge rent for it every month, which is, again, a terrible, terrible situation to be in. And that situation was contrived, fabricated, created by the executives.
All right, so just to play devil's advocate slightly, let's say they want to monetize the underlying land and they think other people can manage the land aspect better than they, maybe build apartment. Let's say, I mean, if we imagine this were in New York City and they had big spaces devoted to the hospitals, a lot of nonprofits sell the air rights. So there's churches and whatnot. They keep the church, or they maybe redo the church, but there's a 30-story building on top of it. They can't be a church and do the real estate. They sell the rights to something else. They buy their churchness back, and then they're off to the races and they become and stay at church. And they want to do that. So it wouldn't necessarily be in the interest of the steward if they had something was profitable as part of the business aspect of St. Elizabeth's et al., the other hospitals, to kill whatever, maybe it's a smaller goose laying smaller golden eggs, but it could theoretically be a money-oriented pursuit. So, I mean, they could have twofold. I mean, a lot of the KKR management, during I forget the name of what they were doing there, leverage buyouts and so forth. They would take the company, they'd take take off the things they could, and then kind of stream it down and have that thing do the thing that they are good at. So there's no reason to have a hospital be running real estate when a hospital is good at hospital stuff, doing EKGs and having patients come in running, ICUs and whatnot. So just as an argument, I'm not sure it's always looting per se if you kind of like divorce things out. And again, imagine if through New York City, that real estate would be hugely valuable.
Except that in this case, the end result was bankruptcy. The end result was the hospital losing everything it owned. The end result was patients not getting the medicines, the tools. In Boston, in the 2020s, a mother died during childbirth because a particular tool had been repossessed by the vendor from St. Elizabeth's Hospital because St. E's didn't pay for it. Where was the money to pay for it if it was a successful enterprise? It wasn't a successful enterprise. So, in those leverage buyout examples that you said, where the guy came in, the corporate raider came in and streamlined things and, made sure that it was a successful company at the end of it, cut it, made it lean, mean,
right,
successful. That's not what happened at Steward. It wasn't lean, mean, and successful. It was saddled with even more debt. So that's the problem.
So do you think they intended to kill the company right from the get-go, Steward?
I think I'm 100% convinced, and it's my personal opinion, that yes, from the get-go, the aim of the exercise was to suck all the wealth out of Caritas Christi's assets. It was asset looting, asset stripping. That's what I see.
So the only, I suppose, incentive to that would be to get some short-term bonuses and whatnot, show profit, and then we're all done with it because we're not going to be able to run these hospitals for the long term. I mean, it could be that these hospitals are just not intended to be profitable because, again, there's kind of an amalgamating effect. I think there's, I'm not going to label it a monopoly per se, but it seems that most of the power in the Boston area is with this, Partners, MGH, Brigham. It keeps, growing and all these satellites coming out and everything's under that flagship.
I understand, but somehow looking at the data, I don't see any active emasculation or strangulation of Steward Healthcare's finances or income or money coming in for healthcare. So they got paid for providing their services. It wasn't as if they didn't get paid. They may have gotten paid less than Mass General Brigham.
Well, maybe they're less efficient than Mass General Brigham. I don't know. Maybe they're getting fewer Saudi princes coming in.
That's not how they got into debt and went into bankruptcy. They got into debt into bankruptcy through what's called financial engineering. So it was the financial engineering aspect and not the healthcare aspect that killed this goose. Yeah.
All right. So at the end of the day, we're going to be wrapping up very shortly. So I'd like you to give people an outline of what happened and what should have been done, what can be done. Are there any actual crimes committed? Is there somebody that should be looking into this, and does anybody do this on the Boston scene?
So I have reached out to a lot of people, including House Speaker Ron Mariano, who has received my email, saying that former Attorney General Martha Coakley must be questioned under oath, either at the State House or at the AGO or the U.S. Attorney's Office as to why she declared that this sale was in the public interest, and obviously it was not. It was such a disaster from the get-go. But for some reason, no one wants to go there. So one of the reasons I came today was to sort of press that point We need to know. We need to know how this happened from the beginning. So we need an accounting, a postmortem. You know, this is sort of like an airplane crash. So when you do an airplane crash investigation report, you start from the very beginning, right? You go through the history of each pilot. You go through how their cockpit atmosphere was and how they were talking when they were in the cockpit. That's recorded by the cockpit voice recorder. That's the sort of crash investigation report we need for Steward Healthcare, and that can only be done with Martha Coakley under oath and others like Mary Beckwith, or what's her name, Beckwin. I'm sorry, I keep mixing her name. They need to be questioned under oath as to how this crash happened.
Fair enough. So we don't necessarily have any proof. Again, be devil's advocate. We don't necessarily have any proof that, you know, some other company could have made these companies work. I mean, they were, you know, sold under duress, and the management, I don't know if it stayed or not, whatever. Are there some
Again, the medical side was functioning just fine. It's not as if they stopped having any income. They lost, you know, money, but then all hospitals lose money. And, you know, at best, you know, even MGH, they make what, 2%, 3% profit a year with all of their economies of scale. That wasn't the problem here. A lot of hospitals, I think like 70% of hospitals sort of, you know, limp along, whether or not they make an actual profit every year. But what happened here was way worse than that. And the fact that there was a crash compels an investigation.
Right. But if a lot of hospitals don't make money, how do they continue to exist?
Because, you know, the government chips in, you know, under the safety net regulations to keep them going because they provide an essential services. It's like subsidizing plane routes to certain small towns and rural areas.
Or the post office. So does that happen here?
Yes.
Yes,
it's called the safety net. So there's a Medicaid waiver program that provides money to health safety net hospitals.
All right. And so how can people find you if they want to help support your work?
I have a Patreon. I'm Dr. Bharani, so that's Patreon is very simple, Dr. Bharani. You know.
Right, so the Bharani is B-H-A-R-A-N-I.
Yes.
And we have a QR code I'm hoping to have inserted here so people can just flash their phone on it. And I have another one for our Facebook page for the Newton Taxpayers Association. So I recommend people follow us and join us in our efforts at raking muck.
Yes.
In order to find the nuggets and preserve them.
Raking muck is essential for public accountability.
All righty, and so I suppose we may have time to one last question, which is, you know, we kind of see this aspect of the Attorney General running for governor. What's on the horizon, and has the Attorney General's office been a good, no pun intended, steward for the people of Massachusetts?
I'm not impressed with them one bit.
Anything going on currently with the AG office?
Oh,
1 minute, last minute.
I can't say for sure just yet. I'm still looking into them. I'm looking to them very closely. But yeah, the problem with the AGO is it's a permanent civil service. So no matter who the Attorney General is, the people running the ship are the same.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. It's a pleasure, and I recommend people follow you. They can once they go to the Patreon, they can see your name. They can swipe it and find you. Maybe. On social media, we'll have to work on that, but they can help support your work with their efforts and dollars. And so that's how answers are going to happen, because the Boston Globe, et cetera, they are not that interested in following up on this apparently.
No, no interest at all.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. City of Newton, on behalf of the Newton Taxpayers Association, this is Randy Bach.